Welcome back to the Absolute Reason podcast. I am Joan, your freaky philosopher, and this is where we further discover and explore spiritual intelligence, or what I have come to call the art of sacred physics. Now, you have all heard in my introduction video how I went on about my duty as a teacher. And it's exactly from that point where I decided to make this episode all about duty. What does it mean to have a sense of duty? What are your duties within your everyday experience? How does it help you as an individual to have a better understanding of your duties? And most important of all, how does it help you guide your everyday choices so that you do not get perverted along the way, but so that you can keep your eye and your will fixed on morality, on your spiritual intelligence, and on the art of sacred physics. Just so that you know that I don't just pull this information out of my bottom, I thought let me just show you what book I used for today's knowledge and today's lesson. Yes, I do contribute and add and supplement this knowledge with the knowledge gained from the CCHANDOGYA Upanishad. But today we will be mainly focusing on duty, and that knowledge I gained from this little book. Advice to the Householder. I discovered this little book on a mountaintop in Sri Lanka at a Hanuman temple. And although it's only 40 pages long, look how thin this thing is. It's barely a book. It's only got 40 pages. But the potency of the knowledge contained here is life-changing. So the book is called Advice to the Householders, and it was published by the Central Chinmaya Mission Trust in Mumbai. So let's get started. So before we begin the lessons, let's first see what the definition of a householder is. No, I'm a housewife, indeed, but I'm also a householder. The concept of a householder relates to your spiritual life, your spiritual well-being, your perception of this creation, and what your relationship is to it. Now, if you speak to a normal civilian, an everyday Joe Schmo out in the street, the vast majority of humanity doesn't want wars and aggressions and all of these controversial issues where we end up killing each other. We don't want that. But a vast majority of us also find ourselves in a position where we wonder, well, what can I do, man alone? I am not in politics. I am not in some or other government institution that produces or manufactures weapons. I am not a contractor in that department. So what exactly do you want me to do as an individual? Well, spiritual intelligence, morality, consciousness functions in a way where you as an individual have the power to bring change about. And you do this by bringing change to yourself, by uplifting yourself, raise yourself by yourself. Through your very actions, you begin to influence the atmosphere and the people around you. That is when we start building on top of each other. And before we know it, we have an environment that is spinning and created around morality and not around force and control through the powers that be and wars. This can make a difference if you begin to move inward and make changes to yourself in a spiritual way. Through the concept of, you can call it quantum string theory, but you know, us old school people, we just call it consciousness. We know that there is a macro and a microcosm, and we know by building and elevating ourselves as individuals, we have a direct influence on the planet and the consciousness of the planet. The more of us begin to live in a moral way, the more the planetary consciousness will be elevated, and the less power is held by those who wish to force and control everything around them through a violent way. This is the potent power of spiritual intelligence. So let's go look at what exactly is the concept of a householder. And keep in mind what I just told you. It's all about the individual elevating himself and how that personal introspection has an effect on the entire globe and consciousness. So, what's the definition of a householder? A householder is one who is in the midst of fulfilling his worldly duties, but who is also striving to lead a moral life, while still facing the different challenges both in our domestic, social, and professional lives. So in a nutshell, a householder is somebody who still performs their everyday duties as an individual, a parent, somebody who's part of a society, and an individual who goes to work every day. This is called the path of the householder, where you do all of those functions, you perform all of those duties, but you do it in a moral way. This is what it's called to be a householder. So what are the 4 categories of duties that we as human beings need to take responsibility for? First of all, you have a duty to self, to yourself as an individual. Secondly, a duty to your domestic well-being. This means a duty to your elders, to the children, and to your partner as a husband or as a wife. Then you have a social duty. This is to your community. And lastly, you have a competitive professional duty to your chosen profession. So there are 4 duties. Duty to self, a domestic duty, society duty, and a professional duty. So there are 4 duties: duty to self, a domestic duty, society duty, and a professional duty. Quite simple, isn't it? But add this to the knowledge now. These duties work in an outward spiral when it comes to the hierarchy of duties. In other words, my duty to self is first and foremost my duty. Secondary is my domestic duty. On the 3rd level is my duty to society, and on the 4th level is my duty to my profession. Why is this spiral important? Well, because I am a woman, all in all. I am a female, so I love watching true crime. And it's when you observe these investigators that you notice they do exactly the same thing. When they arrive at a scene of a crime and there's now somebody dead, the first and foremost thing they start looking at is are the things that are closest to the individual. So they will first look and see, was this suicide? You see that aspect of self that is observed first. Well, it wasn't a suicide. So who are closest to this individual? Let's go look at the husband, the wife, the children, the friends. See, we're moving in an outward spiral. So we cover the domestic aspect of our investigation. Well, crikey, now the investigator sees it wasn't suicide, it wasn't somebody in the family, in other words, domestic. So now I need to go look in society. Is there some or other stranger danger who moved in next door? So they will go and investigate that. And they will also investigate the individual's professional environment to see if there was maybe a boss or somebody other than your boss, maybe a colleague who wanted to kill this person. You see, what I teach is not like hololo and woo and completely out of touch with reality. You can connect it with the most basic things in life. Work in an outward spiral the same way an investigator would when they are investigating a homicide or a death. Do the same thing. So now I want to investigate as an individual. I have a free will choice in front of me. How do I make sure that choice, the decision I make, is aligned with morality? Well, I go look at myself first and foremost. You want an example, don't you? I can have an example. Let me get an example. Let me just dig here in my back pocket. Wait. Got an example. So, let's say mainstream media wants you to do something that you are not quite sure about. They want you to, let's just use, let's say they want you to put something in your body you don't want to put in your body, or that you are suspicious about. How do you make a moral choice in this scenario when mainstream media is telling you you need to act in a responsible way to society or your profession? How do I gauge that instruction to make sure that my choices remain moral, but still based on free will and my own personal spiritual intelligence? Let me show you. And this is why that spiral is so important. When society comes to me and tells me I need to do a specific thing in order to live in harmony with society, I will not just do it. I will go and investigate the instruction and then make an informed decision. It's called critical thinking. It's not the boogeyman, it's just critical thinking. But now I overlay my critical thinking with a new structure of my sense of duty. So now I'm going to apply critical thinking, but with my informed knowledge of where my duties lie as a human being and as an individual who functions within society. I always want to live in harmony with society. That is quite true. But what if society is making a demand on me that I do not feel comfortable with? What do? Well, first of all, I go and look at myself. Then I will move outward into my domestic life. I will go and speak to my wife and my immediate family, gain knowledge and perspective from them. Then I will go into society and observe what society is doing, and I will obviously also go look at my profession and see what demands come from my profession, and are those demands in line with my duties and responsibilities as a human being. Sounds helpful, doesn't it? But it's really only helpful when you gain the understanding of the threefold nature of things. So what is the threefold nature of things? So I have this entire scenario. Society is asking me to do something I don't want to do. This is where I apply the threefold nature of things. I know that there is me as an individual, there is an environment that I live in, and then there is the relationship that forms between these parts, the individual and the environment. So I know the environment is making a demand on the individual that the individual isn't comfortable with. Okay, so I know that. Threefold nature of things is giving me spatial, what's the word I'm looking for? Orientation. So it's the individual and it's the environment, and there is a relationship between these two parts. But let's go and look at you as the individual. You also need to gain knowledge as to the threefold nature of the individual. What is it within you that shapes, molds, and forms your everyday actions, even your facial expressions? Well, the Vedas, now this is where you learn another source of material, another source of ancient knowledge that I use for the art of sacred physics. You see, I use this book. Let me just grab it here. This is the CCHANDOGYA Upanishad. There we go. I had to print it out because I'm a crazy mofo. And as you can see, I just make notes everywhere. Notes, 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 more notes, little pictures every now and then, more notes, 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 notes. When you see notes in my books, you know I really love the book because I just want to consume everything in it. So the threefold nature of things and the threefold nature of who you are as an individual, I sourced that information out of the Vedic book of the Chandogya Upanishad. I'm not going to go into detail about who, what, and where this is. You can go and Google and educate yourself. But just so that you know that when I teach the threefold nature of things and the threefold nature of the individual, it's not just a creative glitter bomb that I decided on, but I've gained the structure from the Upanishads. So it is in the Chandogya Upanishad where they teach that you have a threefold nature as an individual. There is the will of the individual. Then the individual gains knowledge on the impulse, on whatever topic you are pursuing. So we have will and we have knowledge. The third concept and aspect of the threefold nature of the individual is action. Your actual action that you take after you have had an impulse, a will to pursue something. Then you gained knowledge on that topic and then you acted on that knowledge. So when the two are observed, in other words, when you observe an impulse to pursue something, a desire, I have a desire to pursue something, then I go and gain knowledge on that aspect that I desire. But it's the coupling forces of will and knowledge that brings about action. So when I say when the two are observed, they become three, what I mean to say is that your very action is preceded by your will to act and your knowledge on how to act. Doesn't that make sense? So now you as an individual understand that you have a threefold nature that makes up the beautiful bubble that you are. You have will, knowledge, and action. Me as an individual, I function in a reality that has a threefold nature of things. In other words, I am an individual who functions in an environment, and my individuality forms a relationship with the environment. Again, when the two are observed, they become three. So when the individual is observed within an environment, what do you notice? You notice a relationship. Exactly. You notice a relationship. So then we go look at that relationship and we align that relationship with our sense of duties and responsibilities bestowed upon us as humanity. Now we know, okay, so what are my duties and responsibilities in my job description as an individual who functions in an environment? This will determine my relationship and my ultimate happy day or not. So I know now I have 4 duties. There are 4 categories of duties that I as an individual have. I have a duty to myself, my will, my knowledge, and my action. I have a duty to my domestic life. This moves into my environment. What are my duties as a wife, a mother, or my duties to my elders, or just children within the family? Then I have my duties to society and community, and I have my duties and responsibilities at work. So doesn't that just give you orientation, a better idea of what is humanity and how do we fit into this creation? And you achieve this sense of understanding and this orientation. Where is what and what am I and why am I here and how do I make a better moral life? Now you're beginning to understand the model. And this is the model of the art of sacred physics. So that is the end of this podcast, this episode, so that you can better understand what are your duties as a human being and how this better understanding of your duties can help guide you to live a moral life, which bet your bottom, the more we do it, the more people begin to live within morality, the greater the effect on the entire consciousness of the planet and society and your profession and your domestic life and ultimately you. So let's do a quick recap. Okay, so we learned that as humanity, we have been bestowed duties and responsibilities in the same way you are bestowed duties and responsibilities when you start a new job. It's your job description. So we learned humanity actually has a job description. That job description is shown to us in the form of our duties, a hierarchy of duties. In other words, yes, there are 4 categories, but my duty to self is first. My duty to my domestic life is second. My duty to society is third. And then my duty to my profession is last. And then there is a return current flow and it all spirals again. So from the profession, you will just go back into the stable center core and begin with self again. It is a vortex, a repeating pattern. All right, so we have our duties and we know it spirals and it will never end. We know our duties have a hierarchy system. For orientation, we had a look at the threefold nature of things. In other words, how does my greater and my deeper sense of duty now function within reality? And it was the threefold nature of things that gave us an orientation. It made us aware that there is the individual and then there is the environment. When the two are observed, they form a relationship. And it is when we were looking at our relationship, the relationship that we form with our environment through the performance of our duties, that we needed to go a step further so that we can have a look at the threefold nature of the individual. I did this so that you can gain a better understanding of what does it mean when I say you need to have a stable center core. Your threefold nature needs to be aligned. And that's when we learned that we have will as individuals. Then we gain knowledge around what it is that we will to desire. And it is when these two are observed, will and knowledge, that we move into action. So it is will, knowledge and action that form the threefold nature of who you are. So we know now. I know who I am because of my stable center core, my threefold nature. I know I function within the threefold nature of things. There is me, the individual, the environment I live in, and the relationship that forms. And then me as an individual, I now understand, because of the relationship I form with my environment, that I have certain duties and responsibilities. These duties and responsibilities were categorized as, and this is in a hierarchy model. My first and foremost duty is to myself, then my domestic duties, then my social environmental duties, and lastly my duties to my profession. And it is through an understanding of my duties that I begin to have a better day, because my life and my entire fixed center core is structured around morality, the critical values in life that make sure you are good and well as an individual, that you feel safe and yet adventurous enough to discover more about who you are. It is a sense of self that we learn through the concepts of our duties. I hope that has helped you a little bit. Go play with the duties. Go look at, what is my duty to self? And go play around with the scenarios that happened 3 or 4 years ago and see how that would have impacted the choices you made then, even if it was just in the way you responded to those different to you. Look at your duties, work with them, analyze them, and begin to orientate yourself and align yourself with morality as your stable center core. I am Joan, your freaky philosopher. Thanks for joining me. You are and forever will be my absolute reason.